So again, last week I started a sermon series on the 5 core ministries of a healthy congregation. The fancy words, liturgia, and koinonia, kerygma, diakonia, didache. And our focus last week was on that worship one, liturgia. This week I want to focus on the didache one, the church's ministry of teaching and learning. That slide's going to be up on the screen for the rest of the sermon. It'll be there for your reference. So before we do that, let's remind ourselves of why these 5 ministries matter. We often think that the church has a mission. What's your mission statement? What's your purpose statement? But that thinking is backwards. God has a mission, and God's mission has a church, as the saying goes. The church, as you know, it isn't a building, it isn't our community, our committees, it isn't even our programs. The church is the people. I can't do it. The people that God gathers, the people that God shapes into these missions, these ministries, and the people that God sends out on mission into the world. So that's why these 5 ministries matter so much. They aren't simply 5 things that churches do. They're 5 ways that God shapes us, each of us, into a people together so that we can participate in God's mission. So you build these 5 capacities in a congregation's people, and the congregation's collective capacity to participate in God's mission naturally follows from there. So last week we took the first look at Acts chapter 2, and we noticed what the first Christians did. And this week I want us to notice something different. How they did it. I asked you at the beginning, during the reading of the passage, to listen for that how it got described. It said, they collectively devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings. They broke bread together. They prayed together. They held their possessions in common. They shared meals. They praised God. It's a they, collectively. They welcomed new believers. So one thing keeps echoing through the description of that early church, a sense of togetherness, a collective, a plural. The 5 core ministries that you see on the screen there, they weren't simply activities or programs. They were relationships. God wasn't simply organizing programs. God was forming, shaping people, plural people. So today, as we talk about this, the other, one of the 5 strange words up there, didache, while we talk about it, the same thing is going to be true, that this teaching and learning ministry of the church, it's not simply doing education. It's not simply conveying information. It's formation. It's forming plural. Now, last fall, our congregation invited Alana Martin of the Go Project to assess our children and youth ministry and recommended next steps for us. And last month, Alana shared a report. Council struck an ad hoc committee to study the report and to guide its implementation. The report's very first top-level recommendation isn't about staffing. It isn't about budgets. It isn't about programs. The first recommendation is theological. That word itself may make you tune out. But put differently, before we decide what we should do, we need to first ask, well, what do we believe? What do we believe about ministry? What do we believe about children and youth ministry? And the answer to that question has to reflect what it is we believe about ministry in general. And that ministry is about formation, plural. Last week, we emphasized what the church does and the answers, these 5 core ministries. Today, I'm emphasizing how God accomplishes it, how we get shaped into these capacities. We tend to think about children and youth ministry as programs, about what we do in that programming. What do? We do Sunday school, or we do children's worship, we do youth group, we do vacation Bible school. And those programs, they matter. But the report that Alana gave to us points to something that has to come before that, points in a deeper direction. That children are formed through belonging. They're formed through participation in worship. They're formed through relationships. They're formed through the shared practices of the congregation. They're formed in the plural. Again and again in the scriptures, God forms people. Christ forms disciples through relationships, because God's mission isn't entrusted to programs or activities. God's mission is entrusted to people, plural. So, last week I described those 5 core ministries. I described them as programs because it's an easy first step for us to wrap our minds around. What are these weird Greek words? What do they mean? But today I want to just go back and say, before any of these are programs, they're relationships. Worship, what we're doing right now, isn't fundamentally a service that we organize, religion. Liturgia, that fancy word, is our relationship with God. It's spirituality. Fellowship isn't fundamentally coffee hour or pastoral care, the religious stuff we have. Koinonia is how followers of Jesus relate to one another. Spirituality. Outreach isn't fundamentally about having a community kitchen, isn't fundamentally about having a meal ministry. Diakonia, which is beneath that, is how followers of Jesus Christ relate to our neighbors who are hungry, who are sick, who are oppressed. That's the spirituality part. Evangelism. It isn't about marketing or saving souls. That's the religion. Kerygma, beneath it, is how we relate to people who need to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. That's our spirituality. And so that leaves today's word, didache. Christian education doesn't start with having a curriculum, or the right curriculum, or the wrong curriculum. It isn't first a classroom, a religious classroom. It is teaching and learning through relationship. What's happening over in the corner there? Relationship. Forming is happening. There's an activity, but that activity is what we see. There's something deeper within it. That ministry is where Christian practices are modeled and they're passed on. That's the spirituality that we want to develop within our children. So, you know this, that Christian teaching has never been simply about transferring information from one person to another. It's always been about passing along a particular way of life. So imagine this. Some of you may need to go back, further in time, or as grandparents, but imagine you're a preschooler blurting out a 4-letter word. Everything goes silent when that happens, right? And then you, the parent, asks, "Where did you learn that word?" child points at you. Of course, no parent ever sits down with a child and says, today I'm going to teach you a 4-letter word. There is no lesson. There is no curriculum. There's simply the relationship, which is the classroom, where ways of living get passed from one to the next generation. Children are always learning from the people that they live among. That's how almost everything that's important in life gets learned. We learn how to speak, we learn how to argue, we learn how to forgive, we learn how to spend money, we learn how to treat strangers by having it modeled to us. Not because somebody planned a lesson or a religion, but because we lived among a people, plural, whose habits slowly became our own and formed our spirituality. So in Christian discipleship, didache, that teaching and that learning, it works the same way. Now, last week I suggested that one of the things that ticks me off about congregations is how we'll unintentionally reduce our discipleship to what happens during the hour of worship on Sunday morning. That the liturgia part of our ministry gets reduced. Everything's reduced into that hour where we try and squeeze in the fellowship and the proclamation and the service and the learning. That the other 4 ministries, they become occasional, they become optional outside of Sunday morning. They become someone else's responsibility. The same thing risks being true when it comes to children and youth ministry. Again, we tend to think that children's ministry is something that the church provides, a religion. We overlook the fact that the early church says ministry is about participating with God's people. It is where formation happens in the plural. So if in this congregation we let children and youth ministry be simply another program, you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. If you don't know what's happening, I'm about to tell you what's going to happen. If we let children and youth ministry just become a program, then every other adult is going to quietly excuse themselves from participating in it. Boy. Whether we intend to or not, every adult in this congregation, whether we intend it or not, every single one of us, we're already teaching our children what it is that we believe. Every congregation is already teaching its children what to do, by what they do, and by what we don't do. And so the question becomes, are we teaching them how to be shaped this way? What are we teaching them? And so before we ask what curriculum our children need, we should ask what kind of disciples we want them to be shaped into. Shaped in the plural. Do these children see the adults worshiping? Well, yeah, they do. Do these children see adults praying? Yeah, they do. Do these adults see us welcoming strangers? Maybe. Maybe here, but outside of this hour? Do these children see the adults continuing to learn and be shaped ourselves? I don't know. Do they? Do we want them to? Because these are the practices that the children will naturally inherit. So that's why I agree with the report. I believe that the success for children and youth ministry depends upon the success of our adult discipleship. It depends on us not getting trapped in the idea that Christian education is a thing that you do when you're this age. And it's not a thing that you do outside of Sunday morning trying to stay awake during a sermon. Before we intentionally shape children for worship, we ourselves have to become worshipers. Before we, the plural, intentionally shape our children for fellowship, we ourselves have to be shaped into practicing hospitality. Before we intentionally shape our children for service out in the world, we ourselves must be shaped into being servants. Before we intentionally shape our children to proclaim the good news out in the community, we ourselves have to first become comfortable as adults speaking about our faith. Same is true before we shape our children in being lifelong learners, didache, teaching, learning. We need to continue growing ourselves by participating in teaching and learning. Children do not simply need our programs. They need adults that they can witness becoming disciples, modeling it to them. And so let me end by going back to the Go project. If you read the report, you'll know that it lists some very important next steps. Hiring Sunday leadership for children and youth, especially the older ones. Restarting the monthly family dinners. Including worship elements in children's worship rather than allowing it to simply become classroom and crafts. I hope we'll do these things. I think they're all very excellent recommendations, but the report is wise enough to say, don't begin there. Begin with your theology of ministry. Begin by asking, what do we believe about children and youth ministry? And this morning I've tried to suggest one answer to that question, that children and youth are formed, plural. Not simply by programs that we provide, but through the relationships they have with the adults who are ourselves being shaped through these 5 capacities. And so as that happens, then our children won't simply learn about the Christian religion. They'll learn Christian spirituality, how to become disciples, become followers of Jesus Christ. Amen.